In the year 476, the last emperor of Rome was a teenage boy. He wasn't executed, he wasn't even imprisoned. He was just paid off, sent to live in a quiet villa on the coast, and told to disappear. The most powerful empire in human history didn't end with a bang. It ended with a shrug.
And here's the part that should genuinely bother you. The exact same warning signs that killed Rome also killed the Bronze Age superpowers 1,300 years earlier, and the Maya cities, and the Soviet Union. Different centuries, different continents, same pattern. Almost like a machine running the same program over and over. So today, we're going to open up that machine. We're going to reverse engineer the death of every great empire in history and find the hidden gears turning underneath. And fair warning, once you see this pattern, you cannot unsee it. By the end of this video, you might start looking at the modern world a little differently. Every empire starts the exact same way, with a problem being solved. Rome solved the problem of constant tribal warfare. The Maya solved the problem of feeding huge cities in a jungle. The Soviets solved the problem of total industrial collapse after a revolution. Empires are born as solutions. But here's the part nobody tells you in school. The very success that builds an empire also plants a bomb inside it. And that bomb has a timer. It just takes centuries to go off. Stage 1 of every collapse looks like the opposite of collapse. It looks like a golden age, Rome under Augustus, the Maya during their classical peak, the Soviet Union in the 1950s, launching satellites into space. Everyone alive at that moment thinks the good times will never end. But that's not the weird part. The weird part is what success actually does to a society. When an empire wins, it creates way more rich and powerful families than there are jobs at the top. Historians call this elite overproduction. Basically, too many kings, not enough thrones. Think about it like a company that hires too many managers. At first, it feels impressive. Then everyone starts fighting over the same handful of corner offices. In an empire, those corner offices are governorships, generalships, and seats next to the emperor. And there's only ever room for so many. The Ottoman Empire actually built an entire system just to manage this problem. Sultans would have their own brothers quietly imprisoned in a gilded palace apartment for their entire lives just so they couldn't challenge the throne. That's how seriously empires have always taken the threat of too many powerful people with nowhere to put their ambition. So the ambitious ones start competing, quietly at first. Favors, bribes, marriages, then less quietly. And this is where the second gear of the machine kicks in, because to win that competition, you need money. A lot of it. Which brings us to the part every single collapsed empire has in common, without exception. The money stops being worth what it used to be worth. Rome's silver coin, the denarius, started out almost pure silver. By the time Rome was falling apart, that same coin was less than 5% silver. The rest was cheap metal painted to look like the real thing. People were paying real bread and real labor for what was basically a shiny lie. And before you think this was just a Roman mistake, the Ming dynasty in China did the exact same thing with paper money almost 1,000 years later. They printed so much of it so fast that merchants eventually refused to accept it at all, and the government had to go back to trading in raw silver like paper money had never existed. And here's the question that should be bothering you right now. Why would the smartest empire on Earth deliberately make its own money worthless? Because the government was broke, and debasing the currency was the easiest way to hide it. Instead of raising taxes and making people angry today, you quietly stretch the same amount of silver across 10 times more coins. Nobody notices immediately, but everybody feels it eventually. This is stage 2, and it always shows up for the same reason. Empires get expensive to run, really expensive, because stage 1, that golden age, usually came with something else attached: expansion. Bigger territory sounds like a win. More land, more people, more resources. But nobody puts on the recruitment poster what bigger territory actually costs. Roads, forts, soldiers stationed for years in freezing forests 1,000 miles from home. Officials to manage cities that don't even speak your language. At its largest, Rome's borders stretched over 6,000 miles. A message from the capital to the edge of the empire could take months to arrive. Imagine trying to run a company where an email takes 60 days to reach your own branch office. Now imagine that branch office is under attack. So the empire keeps growing, keeps spending, keeps debasing its coins to cover the gap. But that's still not the weird part. The truly strange part is who ends up paying the real price for all of this. It's never the nobles fighting for the throne. It's the regular people, farmers, soldiers, shopkeepers, the ones with no vote in any of this. Because when the coins become worthless and the government still needs money, there's only one place left to squeeze:
Taxes, higher, harsher, and often collected by force. In late Rome, some farmers abandoned their own land because the taxes cost more than the land could ever produce. Entire villages just walked away and vanished into the forests rather than keep working a field that was bleeding them dry.
Now stop and really sit with that. The people who grow the food, who build the roads, who fight the wars, they are quietly giving up on the empire. Not with a riot, not with a revolution, just with a slow, silent walk away. And that is stage 3 of the collapse. Trust breaks. Not trust in the emperor specifically, trust in the whole idea that the system is worth staying loyal to. And here's the part historians find almost eerie. This exact same trust collapse shows up on schedule in the Bronze Age collapse around 1177 BC, when half a dozen advanced civilizations fell within decades of each other. Historians spent decades arguing about what caused that one. Earthquakes, invasions, famine, drought. But the more they dug, the more they realized it wasn't really one cause. It was all of them, hitting a system that had already quietly rotted from the inside. The final disaster is never the real story. It's just the thing that gets the blame. So let's ask the real question. If the final invasion or plague isn't the true killer, what actually finishes the job? The answer is almost always the same 3 words. Nobody trusts anybody. By late Rome, the army wasn't full of Roman citizens fighting for their homeland anymore. It was full of paid foreign mercenaries, fighting for whoever paid them the most that month. Loyalty had literally become a subscription service, and subscriptions get canceled.
So picture the position Rome was actually in near the end. A currency nobody believed in, taxes nobody could afford, an army that would switch sides for the right price, and an aristocracy still fighting each other for the throne like nothing was wrong. This is stage 4, total institutional hollowing.
The buildings are still standing, the titles still exist, the parades still happen, but underneath, there's nothing left holding it up. It's a shell, and shells look completely fine right up until the moment they don't.
And notice something strange here. Rome, the Maya, the Ottomans, Ming China, these civilizations never met each other. They didn't read each other's history books or copy each other's mistakes. So why does the exact same shell keep forming over and over in cultures that had zero contact with one another?
You can see this exact shell pattern in the Maya collapse too. Their cities weren't destroyed by one invading army. Researchers now believe a brutal, multi-decade drought hit right as their political system was already straining under too many competing city-states, each one draining resources fighting the others instead of solving the actual crisis. So the drought didn't kill the Maya cities. It just asked a question their political system could no longer answer. Can you actually work together when things get hard? And the answer, city by city, was no. The Khmer Empire built Angkor Wat, one of the largest cities on Earth at the time, supported by a massive network of reservoirs and canals. But that network needed constant, coordinated maintenance from a stable government. When droughts and floods hit back to back, and the ruling elite were too busy competing with each other to manage the water system, the canals silently failed, and the jungles simply took the city back. Same story, different costume with the Soviet Union in 1991. No invading army crossed its border. No foreign empire conquered it. A massive nuclear-armed superpower simply stopped believing in itself and dissolved from the inside in a matter of months. And here's the moment that should really stop you in your tracks. Decades earlier, Soviet economists had already spotted the exact same warning signs we've been talking about. Elite corruption, a fake, propped-up economy, public trust quietly draining away. They saw the cracks. They just couldn't stop the machine once it was already running.
Which raises an uncomfortable question. If the pattern is this recognizable, this repeatable, why hasn't any empire in history ever managed to stop it once it started? Because by the time the cracks are visible to everyone, the people with the power to fix things are usually the same people benefiting from the broken system. Why would the nobles fighting over the throne agree to shrink the empire, or raise their own taxes, or share power more fairly? Fixing the machine means some of them lose.
There's actually a name for this trap in behavioral science. It's called a collective action problem. Everyone at the top can see the iceberg, but no single person benefits from being the one who slows the ship down, because their rivals would just grab the extra advantage instead. So the safest personal choice is always to keep going full speed, even when everyone privately knows where the ship is headed.
So instead, everyone doubles down on short-term survival, debase the currency a little more, squeeze the farmers a little harder, hire a few more mercenaries. Every single decision makes perfect sense in the moment and makes the long-term collapse a little more certain.
This is the part that separates collapse from a normal bad year. A bad harvest is a problem. A lost battle is a problem. But an empire only actually falls when every layer of the system is rotten at the exact same time. Money, trust, loyalty, leadership, all at once.
And that's exactly why the ending always looks smaller than the story deserves. Rome didn't fall to some legendary final battle. In 476, a Germanic commander named Ottowasser simply told the last teenage emperor to step down, and nobody in Rome had the strength left to stop him.
No armies clashed that day, no great final siege. The empire had already been hollow for decades. That day just made it official. And this is maybe the most unsettling truth in this entire video. Empires don't die on the day everyone remembers. They die quietly, years earlier. And the famous date is just the funeral. So if you zoom out and lay every one of these collapses side by side, the Bronze Age powers, Rome, the Maya, the Soviet Union, you start to see the actual machine. 6 gears turning in the same order every single time.
Gear 1, a golden age of success creates too many elites competing for too few positions of power. Gear 2, that competition gets expensive, so the currency gets quietly debased to cover the cost. Gear 3, everyday people get squeezed by unbearable taxes and stop trusting the system. Gear 4, loyalty becomes transactional instead of genuine, so armies and officials serve money instead of the mission. Gear 5, every institution becomes a hollow shell that still looks fine from the outside. And Gear 6, the one everyone remembers, a single shock arrives that the rotted system can no longer absorb.
A war, a drought, a revolution, a pandemic. It almost doesn't matter which one shows up first because by year 6, nearly anything is fatal. That's the machine. Not a curse, not bad luck, just a repeatable, mechanical sequence running the same way across 4,000 years of human history. Now here's where this video could end. A nice, tidy history lesson about the past. But that's not actually the interesting question. The interesting question is whether any modern nation could be sitting somewhere on that same 6-gear sequence right now without even realizing it. I'm not going to tell you which country or point at any headline because honestly, that's not really the point, and reasonable people disagree about it constantly. What I will say is this: historians who study collapse aren't looking for tanks or invasions as the warning sign anymore. They're looking for the quieter gears. Is the gap between the ultra-wealthy and everyone else widening faster than it can be absorbed? Is currency or debt quietly losing real value behind the scenes? Are ordinary people losing trust in the core institutions around them? Is loyalty in politics or business becoming more transactional than genuine? None of those things individually mean an empire is falling. Every society on Earth deals with some of them some of the time. The actual danger, based on every single example in this video, only shows up when all 6 gears turn together at the same time, unnoticed. And that's really the twist hiding underneath this entire story. We like to imagine collapse as something that happens to us, an outside enemy, a natural disaster, bad luck. But almost every empire in this video collapsed from decisions made by their own people, one small short-term choice at a time for centuries, until the choices ran out.
Nobody wakes up one morning and decides to destroy their own civilization. It happens through 1,000 reasonable-sounding choices that all quietly point the same direction. That's what makes this pattern so dangerous. It never feels like collapse while it's happening. It just feels like Tuesday. So here's the thought I actually want to leave you with. That teenage emperor in 476 set off to a quiet villa to disappear. Historians believe he probably lived for years afterward, completely unaware that he just witnessed the ending of the greatest empire the world had ever known. He didn't feel the empire fall. Nobody in Rome that year woke up and felt it either. It only looks obvious now, looking backward, with all 6 gears laid out neatly in a row. Which leaves one last question worth sitting with. If you were living inside Gear 1 or 2 of this exact same pattern right now, today, would you even be able to tell? Maybe that's the real reason this pattern keeps repeating. It was never really about Rome or the Maya or any single flag or empire at all. It's about what happens inside any group of humans once enough time, enough success, and enough power get poured into the same machine. History doesn't repeat because we're doomed. It repeats because the gears are built into us. That's the pattern behind every fallen empire in history. Not a curse, not bad luck, just a machine, quietly running one gear at a time.